Hey friends, this is Marilyn from Tarot Clarity. This particular video is for members only, but it will be one that will spill over into the public because it'll probably be interesting to more than just the handful of you who are currently members. It dawned on me that, there are some tarot decks that are atypical, historic tarot decks that are atypical. Now, I love my Mitelli, and that's very atypical. I love my Tarot of Paris, which prior to my being made aware of the Mitelli, the Tarot of Paris was my favorite deck, and it's still one of my very favorites. And then we have, of course, everyone's beloved Viéville. So we have three tarot decks that step to the beat of a different drummer. Now, a very obvious tarot deck that steps to the beat of a different drummer that precedes all of them is the Solabusca from 1499. But that drummer was not the mass public. These decks are decks that were put out to the public. Now, okay, it could be argued that the Mitelli was created for a patron, which it was, but it was eventually released for public consumption. Okay, so what about these decks? They're all about from the same period of time, 1650-ish, 1660-ish. The Mitelli is Italian. The Viéville and the Tarot of Paris were Parisian. Let's take a look at them. We're just going to look at their triumph cards, because that's what really has my focus and my interest today. Now, I don't have these in any particular order. I probably have, I don't have their boxes in the right spots either. Look at me. Oh my goodness. I probably have the Mitelli first, not because it necessarily was published first, but because it is Italian in origin, and we know the Italians created the game. If anybody knew the triumph cards, it was them. And then I have the Tarot of Paris and the Viéville. My suspicion is that the Tarot of Paris came next, but I don't bet money on that. And then came the Viéville. But any one of these could have been in whatever order. So we have more of a tradition between the Tarot of Paris and the Viéville as somebody passing through with bells. We see the reference to the Italian theater, and there are Italian tarot decks, I think, also that bear that out, but the Mitelli isn't one of them. Mitelli, remember, steps to the beat of a different drummer. And here in the Viéville, I'm using the Flornoy Viéville. I'm using who did this one? Dimanche. I guess the Dimanche from Grimaud, and then this one is Marco Benedetti, of course. So, from the Tarot of Viéville, we see the cat dog, or whatever that thing is. We see bells. We see a walking stick. We see that. He's got ears on his hat. He's got the reflection of himself, which might have been a reference to an Italian theater. So again, it goes back to an Italian decks. We see it here again, mostly in the Tarot of Paris. We see most of those same things. I'm guessing this one came earlier because this one's modified. So I'm thinking the Tarot of Paris came before this. But then we have the Mitelli, which doesn't seem to have any of that. So we have the tradition here of somebody who's disheveled, who's a pauper, which we do see in the earlier Italian decks. And then here we see like a reference to a court jester, perhaps. Here we don't see the court jester thing, but we do, except for the bells, but we do see, what's that thing called? Oh, it's the tip of my tongue. I can't think of it, but you know what I'm talking about. That's the staff that has the fool's head. I'll remember it 5 minutes after I end this video. Okay, now we have the magician. So we have kind of like a Pied Piper kind of guy with a following of young people. He's not fluting a a flute or anything like that, but it's a music making thing. And we, some people would argue that this is the Fool, because it's got the dog. But some people would argue that it's the magician because he's got an audience. And they were these kinds of folks, these folks that came through town to entertain children. Here in the Tarot of Paris, we have somebody who is a batelier, who is playing a con game. We have the dog. So like the dog in the possible magician card of the Mitelli, we do have a dog in the magician card. So there is precedence for a dog being present, right? Plus we have a little monkey too, a dog and a monkey. So we have a sleight of hand trick going on here. And then by the time of the Viéville, it's a little bit more articulated to what we're accustomed to seeing. Just taking a look at them, that's all. So we have, in place of the female Pope with the Mitelli, we have the standing Pope, not a woman. Here we have the female Pope, and this is unusual for the Italian decks because the Italian decks created the female Pope. Pope Joan was in their avoir. She was part of she was definitely part of tarot history. So it's unusual that we don't have the female Pope for the second card in the Mitelli of that period of time. Here we do. She's got a book that she's about to drop, so she's almost disrespectful toward it, right? There's confusion about what's going on at her feet. I mean, the Tarot of Paris is a confusing deck. I have another deck of the Tarot of Paris that was really made very easy to understand and see things, which I should have used, but it's so disproportionately bigger than the rest of these cards, I didn't pull it. And then we have, with the Viéville, closer to what we're accustomed to seeing, right? But notice how abstract everything, with the Tarot of Marseille, you can see how stuff got confused because everything's so abstract. When they were carving and engraving, did they know what, did they recognize the shapes? I don't know. It became a mumbo jumbo. So here we have the Empress again. We have the standing Emperor who is less authoritative than the sitting one. And again, it's not a woman. I suppose if you use the Mitelli or the Baratini, if it ever arrives, that we can maybe get away with applying the Empress energy to her to this card, because it could be a feminine form, but it's not, but it could be. And here we do have the Empress, as we do here. Notice with the Italian card, the Italian deck, we don't have the number of sequence, right? Whereas in the French, we do. We do tend to see numbers. Now, think about this. It's common sense, really. It makes sense to me, at least. The Italians invented the game. They knew the sequence of the triumph order. And depending on the region where one lived, regional players gave different ranking to the triumph cards. So they wouldn't have put numbers on because if somebody played it in another region, it wouldn't be as popular if they had the wrong numbers for their region. But of course, when it migrated to other countries, such as in France, it wasn't their game. And so they had to standardize. They had to determine what order the cards were in so that people could play it and understand. And this basically is the same order that we've adopted for ourselves. The 0 or the 1 through 21 plus the 22nd card, depending on how you think of the Fool. But basically, we've adopted the Marseille order. But that wasn't the case before, right? So here we have the emperor. Now he's the seated emperor. He's the one that's got the most power. So he's in the direction looking that way. And here we have an emperor. Interestingly, he's not traditionally seated looking in that direction. These two have the globe and orb. They all have some type of helmet. Here in the Marseille, with this eventually, we can recognize this as on the verge of being like straight up Marseille. We see the eagle. The Pope. So he has no book or keys. He has a sheet of paper. Now, Mitelli did his own thing. He does have the triple tier crown. In the Anonymous Tarot of Paris, he's got the keys. Look at the size of that key, my goodness. He's got the suggestion of the stigmata. He's got some kind of sphinx thing, creature. And then here, more or less, we have the beginnings of what we're accustomed to seeing in the Marseille. He's got the two individuals who are either pilgrims or cardinals or whatever rank they were, but they were definitely people who were devoted, seeking an audience with the Pope. Although he seems to have a bishop's mitre, doesn't he? Okay, here we have a card of the lover. Now, in the Italian Mitelli, it's more or less the suggestion of love and commitment and just amore, right? That's what we have here. We have Cupid with his bow and arrows. Here we have a couple who's like up to something, right? They're up to something. Cupid's up there to remind us who it is. It's the lover card. And then with the Viéville, we have in the tradition of the Marseille now, a man with two women. Could it be a choice between vice and virtue? Could the person be a magistrate? Was it misunderstood? Could this have just been, an officiant, like marrying the couple, but it became misunderstood as like a choice between vice and virtue? Who knows? Okay, here we have the Chariot. Now, in some of the Italian decks, if a deck was commissioned for a marriage, to celebrate a marriage, frequently the feminine form, the woman, the bride, would be the one in the chariot because they wanted to extol her virtues. The gentleman was marrying a woman of high quality. Here, we have a charioteer being pulled by swans, and we have somebody, I hope they're not abusing the swans. And then here we have the beginning of a traditional Marseille chariot. The scalloped edge. What could be very complicated looking horses or sphinxes or whatever they are with human heads. Very strange. It makes me think of the fly. Okay, here we have Justice. All three, I think we can recognize as Justice. Very beautifully articulated in the Mitelli. We have a Janus thing going on, two faces that are blindfolded. So we have the Scales of Justice and the Sword of Justice, which is a very, very interesting take on the card. And then again, we have what we have accustomed to see in the Marseille tradition, scales and sword. And I especially appreciate when Justice looks at us, or at least when she's not blindfolded. I've done a whole thing on that in other videos. Here we have the Hermit. Oh my goodness, I put these in the order that the Viéville was numbered, so it's a little strange. And like the Mitelli, when the Baratini that I'm waiting on will arrive, we'll see that we have a reversal of the plates, which is what we have going on with the Viéville. There's a reversal of the plates, right? Whatever source they use, it's a reversal. Some people would argue with me on that. It's not a hill I'm gonna die on, but it just seems to me, if you have critical thinking skills, it seems kind of obvious. But I'm not gonna argue. So here we have an older, definitely Father Time, elderly. You see the ravages of time. He's like barely walking with crutches and canes or whatever. It's seen as a virtue, so wisdom of the elderly, but time passing. So here we have something different. We have a monk, right? And he's got his prayer beads. He's coming from an edifice, perhaps a cave. We get the idea of like a hermit in a cave. Is he ringing a bell? That looks like he could be ringing a bell. And then again, by the time of the Viéville, we have a wandering hermit. Maybe he's got a hunchback. We do see hunchbacks in early Italian tarot decks, not necessarily this one. We don't see the lantern here yet. And we don't see it in these either. In the early Italian decks, even predating this, we will see a hermit with an hourglass, because the concept was time. Sometimes we'll see a stag with a rack, right? Because it takes a long time for a deer type animal or whatever type animal it was to grow those things, right? So the hermit really was about the passage of time, wisdom of time. It's seen as a virtue. He's got wings. So, and Mitelli conceived of it as a virtue. We have a little bit of a maybe Diogenes kind of thing going on with a hermit in a cave or whatever. And then here we have more of like a wandering kind of guy. Now remember, instead of being number 9, it's number 11, because probably the plates, a copy was made of the plates, and then, or I don't know. Don't know what happened, but a lot of the numbers are just transposed or upside down. Okay, so here we have Lady Fortuna, very eloquently described by Mitelli. She's Lady Luck Ray herself, Lady Fortuna herself on the wheel, dispensing riches. We have some kind of complicated thing going on, perhaps, I don't know. But we have somebody who's ruling, somebody who has ruled, somebody who has no rule, and somebody who's ascending, which is what we're accustomed to seeing, more or less. And here we have a very abstract and complicated image of the same thing. You can see how the Marseille deck, there's so much abstraction that goes on in some of the ones that are less fine-tuned, Okay, the Italians had a way, remember, these cards, they're portrayed by the concept, right? It's the concept. So the concept was fortitude, moral integrity. That's what fortitude is like moral integrity. So they might have biblical references with a woman with a column. Definitely a biblical reference. Sometimes the same concept was portrayed by a lion, a struggle with a lion, taming the savage beast, which is something I think we see here. There's a billowy scarf that kind of looks like wings, like to remind us it's a virtue. And we have it here. Okay, now this one's different. The Mitelli definitely took a step aside because this image of the hanged man by one foot with a foot bent below, or behind rather, and the hands behind is Italian. But Mitelli didn't opt for that. Mitelli would have understood that this was in reference to a punishment, right? Not a redrum, but a punishment. But this is how Mitelli decided to. I'd love to have had a conversation with Mitelli. Maybe someday I'll do a reading on why Mitelli decided to use this image for the punishment card. But here we have the punishment, hanging, the Italian tradition of hanging by one foot for treason or betrayal or whatever. He's awake because it's like got to be identified. It's like a wanted poster. The whole point of punishing a person and showing their face alive was to disgrace them and humiliate the family. They had to be identifiable. And then here we have the Viéville, which is upside down. And one of the few cards that has the correct number. And had it been printed properly, it would have had like a number that isn't properly written 8, but anyway, that's neither here nor there. So I leave this card, when I use this deck, and I haven't used it in a while, maybe I should start using it more frequently, but when I use the Viéville, I usually always leave it the way it was printed, because for whatever reasons, that's how it comes to us, right? And then when it pops up, it's always a commentary about what its intent was probably to be punishment. But if you read the deck, and if it fits in the context of the question, you use it. And death looks like death in any language. But we have another thing, like with the hermit of time, right? The passage of time. Here, Mitelli chose to give death the hourglass rather than the hermit. And then we have pyramids that show the longevity, right? The pyramids were ancient when Mitelli was around. Death is permanent. It's a long time when you're dead. And then with the Tarot Paris and the Viéville, we get a sense that, death doesn't discriminate. It just it plows through. And during a period of time when, the Black Plague was a real thing. It was a real thing. If you survive that, it was worse, thank God, than anything we've had to deal with on as big a scale. We have Temperance. Which is what it suggests, tempering toxicity of something, or making something stretch, or diluting something. I see it as detoxification. That's my little word for it. But it can be, just diluting the effects of something. But think of the word temperance. It literally is. We had, it's probably even a reference to the wedding at Cana, right? Like stretching the alcohol. So look at, and this one, I love this one, the Tarot of Paris. It's like water not going into another vessel, but being poured on the flame and creating smoke. So that's like a completely different thing that's going on than what we have here in the Viéville and what we have here in the Mitelli. So this one's really pretty cool, different. In the Tarot of Paris. Okay, love me a devil with fire and brimstone. Scary guy. You went to church, this is what you got, When I went to church as a kid, man, this is what I thought. This was the devil I saw, or imagined. So here we have chains as like a weapon, to beat us. Not a good place to go. Almost comical. If I'm lying, strike me. May God strike me. That's what I say always. If I say it every time. If the first time I saw this card, it's like, if I'm lying, strike me. May I be struck. So this is the tower. But remember, it's the concept. It's not the tower that was important. It was the bolt of lightning. It's the beginning of the celestial cards. Right? We have the tower, we have the star, we have the moon, we have the sun, we have the world. That's why another reason why I think the world card was the penultimate card, not the final card, because those are the celestial cards. And why did they depict towers? Because that's what was getting struck by lightning. But it's not the tower that was the important feature. It was the lightning. I didn't read that in a book. This is me. This is me talking. So take it with a grain of salt. It's just me. What do I know? I've just looked at a lot of cards. Now here we have, and it's called, I forget if it means the thunderbolt or the lightning clap or whatever. But clearly, it's confusion. It's chaos. Oh my goodness, can you see it's some type of creature with a beak, and he's riding the beak. And then there's flames from his mouth, and there's the devil, or a devil-like creature. There's maybe an angel, or somebody who's inside there, somebody who's hiding. So it's almost like the mouth of hell, you know? And then we have lightning bolt or thunder. But they didn't have towers perhaps in this town, but they had trees, and that's what got struck. So we have a shepherd with his little flock. We don't see the lightning bolt, however. We don't see it, but the threat is there, and this is the card it represents. That's the concept this card represents. Now, how many people who see the Mitelli for the first time and see this card would say, oh, there's the hermit? And I've said it many, 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 many times from the first time I ever laid eyes on the Mitelli and many, many of my videos, that I'm convinced that somehow this image became the hermit in the French decks. But Mitelli created this image with the lantern that we have seen in decks later than this period, right? At some point, the Mitelli image became the hermit in the French decks. Just an observation. But this is the star. This is the star card. The concept's about a star. This guy's wandering through the night. Here's the star. We have an astronomer. Actually, in those days, he would have been the astrologer. And then we have the same card in the Viéville, right? The same image, or the same concept, rather. We have those who study the sky, the star. They have their calipers. They have their building of learned education, universities, or whatever. But not so in the Mitelli. The Mitelli, he's wandering through. Okay, the concept is the moon. So Mitelli chose Diana, the hunter, the hunter. Is a female hunter a huntress? I don't know. So the concept is the moon. But as in the star, Mitelli's star doesn't seem like the big concept, right? Neither does the moon here. But we have the concept of Diana, who is associated with the moon. Here, for the moon, we have what looks like a lover wooing a woman in a window, like a little bit of a Romeo and Juliet thing kind of going. He's got a harp he's playing or whatever. So that's an interesting take altogether as well. And then with the Viéville, we have somebody threading doing something with thread in the moonlight. Now, prior to this, we've seen this image as the sun. Did it get confused with the sun? Maybe that, and certainly a person wouldn't thread it at night. You need this, you need to do it in the daytime. But maybe it was a way to tie it in with women's work, or maybe it was misunderstood. It just became the moon by mistake. I don't know. Or maybe it was always intentional, and they made a deliberate change to show, to tie it in with women, because the moon is often associated with femininity. The sun, we have Apollo, the Sun King. Here we have a woman being assisted by a monkey. I'm not quite sure I understand this reference. Let me go check the book. I have a couple books. Let me go see. Okay, so here is the other Tarot Paris deck that I mentioned. I didn't use it because the cards are so much larger, but it was put out by the International Museum of Tarot in Italy. And they really cleared up the images, so it's much easier to understand what we're looking at. And hopefully, hopefully, when we get to the moon card, we'll see. Hopefully it's written in English. Yes, okay. Let's see what they say about the moon. I'm getting there. The moon, okay, and I'm taking it directly from this source, written by Morena Poltronieri and Ernesto Facioli, the Tarot of France, Paris, 17th century. The moon, this is another image far removed from the usual symbolism of tarot cards. Here, the moon is represented a moonlight serenade. Oh, no, it's not the moon. It's the sun I'm looking at. Sorry, my bad. The sun. Okay. In the card of the sun, we can see a woman pointing with one finger at a monkey placed in front of her and is holding a mirror. Okay, so it was a mirror. The left hand indicates the ground. This is another unusual representation of the sun, where the monkey probably recalls the ancient connection with artistic imagery, especially painting. In fact, art like the attitude usually ascribed to the animal is a faithful copy of human expressions, a mirror of reality. Painting was considered more suitable to represent the purity, truth, and symbolic synthesis of reality with its very different aspects. Here, then, the mirror, facing the woman's face, shows her image objectively. Similarly, the finger pointing at Earth seems to recall the concept of correspondence between things. What is above is like what is below. And this is the miracle of the unity of the cosmos. Behind the female image appears an inscription, Uno, which may be a reference to the unity, one, of the cosmos. Alternatively, it could be simply a reference to the goddess Juno, to whom the name of the month June is dedicated, a period in which the sun is at its highest point. Oh, goodness, okay. I knew this but forgot it. So I'm so glad. I should reread this book. I haven't used it or read from the Tarot Paris in a while. From this representation, we can deduce that the light of the sun does not hide secrets, and that everything is enslaved to its beneficial power as a giver of life and renewal. The star represents the vital principle from which every living form is born. Its rays are the celestial or spiritual influences emanating from the earth. The sun makes the vision of all things clear and therefore presides over the concept of intellectual knowledge and cosmic intelligence. In addition, the sun symbolizes the strength that comes from the realization of the need to share one's own existence with someone else. For this reason, the card represents family and marriage. Well, that's interesting, which might even describe sometimes why it evolved to having children standing in a garden. So we have three very different depictions of the sun, the concept of the sun. And I think, where did we see this? We saw this before the Viéville. I don't think it was the Solabusca, but what was it? It's one of those things that my brain knew and forgot. Here we have the world card. However, since the French cards are numbered, we'll just put it in their order. So we have the Judgment, which in the Italian Mitelli deck is an angel and making her announcement, or his announcement. There's about to be an announcement. Something real important from heaven. And of course, it was recognized as, I think even in the time of earlier decks than the Mitelli, depicted as the Last Judgment, which is what it's called, the Judgment. So the angel is recalling us. And here we have it in the Viéville. We're being recalled to face our Maker, which is why I think it should be the final card. And I think the Italians in the region of Bologna had it right? Because while we're on Earth and what we accomplish on Earth, the world is still one of the celestial cards. And this is what happens thereafter. Here we have the world card. So here we have Hercules holding the world, as if to say, if you have the whole world, you have a lot of responsibility. Right? He's got the whole world in his hands, but that's a whole lot of burden. And then we have more of a religious bent to it. But here we have the worldliness, what goes on in the world. And we have a woman with I don't know if it may not be a woman at all. I can't even make out who it is. But it's like they have a flag. They're carrying a flag or a banner on top of the world. Somebody's stabbing the world. There's an audience. So the way I did the Oedipus Picard, I should probably do the Tarot of Paris in the same way. Show the Triumph cards and just read a paraphrase of information found in this book, as I did with the Oedipus Picard. Tell me if you're on board. And boy, I'll be really grateful and impressed if you hung out here for 37 minutes, 38 minutes. God, universe bless you for being so awesome and for your support. Until next time, friends, peace, stay well, be brave, and please be kind.